Good evening, everyone. It's Tom Sydney Bushnell, aka Numbers, here from Psych.Club, from the Tom Numbers Show, news with Tom Numbers, and Top of Your Game. And I've got a lady and a gentleman, both at the top of their game. I've got Dr. Jan HALPER-HAYES, and I've got Tony TATA on the show. Welcome back, Jan and Tony. Welcome to the show. How are both of you?
Great to be with you.
Ladies first.
Well, it's always fun to be with you, Tom. I've got a list of words that I'm going to give you because I want you to tell me what they are. They're related to this book that's over my shoulder, not mine, but the general's. So yeah, it's good to be back.
And Tom, great to be speaking with you, and to my dear friend Jan, Dr. Jan. It's always great to see you, and it's a real privilege to be on your show and communicate with your audience.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Tony. You're both welcome. And so let's see, it's always good to start at the beginning. Maybe I should ask, how do you two know each other? How did you meet? That might give a kind of nice kind of background to regular viewers, but also new ones as well. And then we can kind of go from there and talk about your work as a general, the books that you've both written, etc., and some of the current things that we're going through right now. But maybe just a brief kind of how you two know each other. That'd be nice.
Well, what happened after my August 3rd GB News interview went viral?
Yes.
And I started to be asked questions when I would do live podcasts. The first thing I said was, if you want to read nonfiction in a fiction book that will give you peace of mind and let you understand the machinations that go on within our political and military structure, you have to get the book Double Crossfire. So I kept recommending it, I guess, for a couple of weeks, and someone forwarded my interview to Tony, and he sent me a LinkedIn message thanking me, and I responded with, well, how are your worldwide sales going? To which Tony said, Jan, you broke the supply chain. Well, I didn't. The MAGA supporters broke that supply chain, and the book had to be reprinted twice, because, and I get emails, I get messages on X and on Truth. Oh, thank you. And I don't forward all of them to Tony, but I get very excited when people, and now I just got one about the Phalanx Code, and they've already said, this is a great book, get it, and it wasn't even me.
So Tom, this is the book that Jan's referring to, Double Crossfire.
Double Crossfire,
yeah. And this book I wrote 5 years ago, and it posits that a president and vice president, the Secret Service, fake their assassination, and they go into hiding and run the government from behind the scenes. And so obvious parallels to some of the things that are being discussed today, and the fact that I wrote it 5 years before any of this really became even a thought in anyone's mind, both Jan and I found interesting. But I've always tried to look at actions happening today, the huge social movement happening in America with Black Lives Matter and the upheaval of society, and the different things that are happening, the Floyd incident, etc., that created this upheaval. And even before that, the protests. And I thought, what's the natural evolution of this kind of sanctioned, not only sanctioned, promoted by the mainstream media, hysteria and undermining of societal values. And to me, that's kind of where Double Crossfire went, and where Phalanx Code goes is in that direction further. where the protagonist is very much, Garrett Sinclair is very much representative of the common person, whether in America, the UK, globally, that we see this techno-fascism coming down on us and the jackboot of the media on everybody's neck. And so Jan and I sort of bonded over that, after some of the pleasantries of, hey, thank you so much. You made my book go viral. The Kensington Books had to do a couple of reprints. That's always a good thing that an author likes to hear. And Jan was just speaking from the heart about her interpretation of Double Crossfire. But more importantly to me, she absolutely got what I was trying to say. Whether it's Phalanx Code, Double Crossfire, the axis that I come at these books from is I try to tell a great story, and I also try to be somewhat in tune with American culture, global culture, and some of these tectonic shifts that we're seeing happening now. And given my positions at the senior levels of DoD, and I think that was part of the equation, Jan, don't you, that I had served as Trump's Undersecretary of Defense. And so I believe that some people probably thought, maybe rightly so, that I might have a little bit of insight as to what might be happening.
Well, given that was one of my marketing pitches to them, if you want a book that has been written by the former number 3 at the Department of Defense in the Trump administration, get this book. Now, all right, there are going to be a couple of words that I'll be curious for you to do, Tom, not right at this moment, but because there is either the general is either psychic, or he was trained in remote viewing, or he's just got an uncanny sense of being able to put together what isn't said, but sees the signs, because his books are always right on of right now what the issues are. We've got 2 horrible tech magnets, that one that wants to take our privacy away and be an elitist and be in with all the other governments and everything else. And then we've got one that is saying he wants to help protect our personal and financial data. There are so many twists in the book. Every time I think I finished a twist, it's like, oh no, there's one more. And I have been excited because some of the feedback that we've both gotten is that some people never read that genre before. But for me, he comes from not only a place of experience, not only from the military, not only from having led hundreds and hundreds of people in a school district or at the Department of Transportation in a state, but there's a humanness. And in fact, I said to him, Jake, who's the protagonist in Double Crossfire, is just, a typical macho guy. Garrett Sinclair brings the issues of life out as well. And Tony's done a great job of that.
Well, thanks, Jan. And Garrett Sinclair, Tom, is a general. He's a protagonist in Phalanx Code and Total Empire, Chasing the Lion, the 2 books before it. And he's a father of 2 children. He's a husband, and his wife dies of cancer very early in the first book. So it's not like I'm spoiling anything. And so he's been around the block, and he has men and women that he commands. So he has this responsibility, whereas Jake was just this unstoppable force, brute force, to go accomplish the mission with none of the entanglements that perhaps someone of Garrett Sinclair's status as a general and marital status and father to 2 great kids that he's trying to raise and responsible for the men and women. And what I haven't been a general myself and a father myself, the responsibility that you feel for your men and women and you weigh that against what you're being asked to do for your country. And in the fictional world of Garrett Sinclair, the losses that his team takes, he continuously questions more and more. Are we doing the right things for the right reasons? And he's of such a level that he can confront decision makers and policymakers to say, this is what we should do, or we should not do this. And his journey is one of, it is the country that we're being asked to defend, the same country that I signed up to defend 3 decades ago. And I think he draws a conclusion that it's at a precipice, tipping point, if you will, that is it worth risking his family, his teammates, to do the elite's bidding? That's becoming more and more clear today through X and a lot of the revelations that it's really just kind of in our face right now that there are some people in this country that like war, that like sending young men and women into the maw so that they can line their pockets with defense contractor dollars and that kind of thing. And those are the kinds of decisions that Garrett Sinclair's confronting as the leadership is pitting him and his team against really what he considers immoral causes.
Well, so that it's great to have a general that was third in line, if I'm using the correct terminology, to President Trump at the DoD is amazing, and to have your real life experience blended with the ability to write, and what Jan has picked up beautifully, and it's testament because of all the book sales. So Jan's an ace in the deck. She's a great lady, a great gal to know and have on our team. And but you pointed out, Jan, you said it's uncanny how present and prescient Tony's work is right now. And I've just done some numbers while we've just been talking and listening, and you'll see the power of the numbers, how this works. So when I talk about numbers, I'm talking about simple gematria, which is the order of the alphabet. So it's A is 1, first letter, B is 2, C is 3. And the word gematria in numbers equals 74. And also the word Tony also equals 74, which is a nice parallel. But I've just done the numbers on both of your books. So if we do double crossfire, so double is 59. One of the words for 59 is Joker, like the trump card, the Joker card, top card. Crossfire is 112, which is victory, which is Star Trek as well. Add those together is 171. That comes to a few things, which is the revaluation. The River Thames, interesting enough, a geographical point. Me and Jan are close to that. Well, Jan's closer than I am on it. But then phalanx is 76, a magic wand, contact. President Trump spoke about, we have a magic wand. I guess we have a magic wand. My name, Thomas, is 76, but code is 27, which is JFK. And it's interesting how you said about your book series talks about how people fake their deaths and have been pulling the strings ever since from behind the scenes. So I'll just leave it at that and let people think about that. But you add those together, comes to 103. 103 comes to Princess, but it also comes to John Kennedy. But here we go, talking about Jan's prediction. Well, not her observation, but it is kind of a prediction about your work being on time and relevant right now, Tony. Double crossfire, 171, plus phalanx code, 103, comes to 274 in numbers, which comes to 2024. And that's where we're at. So you're on time.
You're sending a chill up my spine. Well, that's pretty amazing. That's pretty good math. What do you think, Jan?
I am always speechless when he draws the parallels of the numbers to what exactly is going on. What is uncanny?
Let's have a look. So that's U-N-C-N-N-Y, is that right?
C-A-N-N-Y.
Uncanny. So U-N-C-A-N-N-Y, yeah?
Correct.
Okay, let's have a look. So you knew, I knew you knew it, Jan. That's perfect. I'm just going to double check it, but Jan knows these. Jan knows this. Okay, U-N-C-A-N-N-Y. Are you there, Jan?
I'm here. What?
So uncanny is 92 numbers. You knew that.
No,
You
I
did.
didn't. I didn't. I honestly, I don't do it. You introduced me to this whole thing, but I've got too many other things to learn about. But no, 92, which is
Numbers. And it's reverse as well. Uncanny. 92 is Manhattan, where I first got my inkling of the numbers when I bumped into Ivanka Trump. But yeah, uncanny, 92 equals numbers, 92. So, and you've got your purple attire. Purple is 88, which is Trump, which is very royal. And the word royal is 71, which is Lady Diana, you know. So it's all, yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
amazing.
Drain the swamp is
Yes.
Drain the swamp is 151, which is Lady Diana Spencer. It's Jesus Christ. It's the Great Reset, which is their one, but then there's the Jasara Reset. So yeah, 151, Drain the Swamp. Pull the plug is 150, Trump Train 150. So let's hope that plug gets pulled very soon.
Yeah.
We're ready. We're ready. What do you think on that, Tony? What do you think in terms of the plug being pulled? What's your feeling about that phrase, that sentiment? What do you see?
Pull the plug, drain the swamp. It's a universal feeling amongst a great majority of Americans that I know anyway, that the bureaucracies in Washington, D.C., London, you pick the city, the nation, are serving themselves and not their citizens. And so this idea that, at least in America, the U.S. Constitution starts with we the people, the government works for us in theory, very much inverted today, particularly under a progressive left rule, is that the federal government has become way too strong. The framers of our Constitution pitted the militias as a counterbalance to strong federal governments. Remember, in the late 1700s, when they were writing the Constitution, essentially what we had was land wars roaming across Europe with Napoleon and all of the land wars that were happening on. Our framers didn't want that, so they even put language in: raise an army, but maintain a navy. The navy needed to be maintained. That word has a lot of meaning, so that it could go out and protect economic commerce, for example, and project power. You raise the army as you see fit. Meanwhile, you've got the well-regulated militias that are a balance of power to the federal power. Today, the federal government is just this giant Pac-Man consuming everything and trying to federalize everything, and that's where there's this very American resistance to that kind of power. And pull the plug, drain the swamp. You pick the euphemism, but it's all about having the government work for the people, not the people working for the government. And the progressive left, the mainstream media, the current regime are all very much interested in keeping their jackboot on the throat of the average American citizen.
Yeah, they are. I was just looking at how you write your book name. So A.J.TATA. And if I've done that rightly, so if we do A is 1, dot is 39, J is 10, dot is 39, TATA is 42, which is new. But you add all that together as 131, which is John F. Kennedy. So there's another nice little parallel. People like that on the show. So yeah. What's the J stand for, please, Tony?
Yeah, it's I took one for the team with my uncle who owned the farm that we ultimately inherited, but it's Gene, Jean. It was my Uncle Gene's name. So whatever that means. And he was a fabulous man. Most people think it stands for John, but it's Gene.
Jean. And then Anthony, does that have an H or no H?
H. Mm-hmm.
So
A-N-T-H-O-N-Y. It's
Okay.
Italian. Anthony Gene Tata. That's it's an Italian name. My father was 100% Italian.
Well, Anthony, if I've done it rightly, is 97. Kennedy's, it's also beautiful. It's the word through. Jean. Let's have a look. Jean 30. Okay, that's nice. So Anthony Gene is 127, the Ace of Spades. It's Magic November. It's November 5th, November 5th. And then Tata, I should say, 42. 169. Oh, that's cool. We got the same one. So Thomas Bushnell's 169. The Great Awakening, 169. But Anthony Gene Tata is 169. Trump Tower is 169. Robert Zemeckis, the director of Back to the Future, is 169. Yeah.
So
Very
interesting story about Zemeckis. His company Image Movers very seriously considered optioning one of my books, the older books called Mortal Threat, and they started doing a treatment and screenplay and all that. And then I think one of the things that you see in Hollywood, America anyway, is that if you're in that conservative camp, right around the time Trump picked me, I quit hearing from Image Movers, and so because there's a lot of content out there, then why support a conservative when you can support somebody else? So that and quite frankly, Jan and I spend a lot of time talking about that Amazon, it seems, has shadow banned a lot of the reviews, a lot of the results, and these mid-level people in these companies, they have a lot of power. They can manipulate the algorithms so your book shows up more, so it shows up less. And to that point, that's the real power that Jan had, and quite frankly, that the entire America First movement has, is that they broke that algorithm. The publisher of Kensington Books wrote me, and my editor from Kensington called me and said, Tony, your Double Crossfire is in the top 100 books in the world on Amazon, and what's going on? And I said, well, it's just a lot of people in the America First movement are reading it, and so and it was that at the end of the day, with a business like Kensington, and I love all the people at Kensington and Sam Martin's Press, my current publisher, it's all about sales, and so if I'm I'm breaking the bank with at least for Kensington, yeah, because the author's the lowest paid guy in the food chain at 10% royalty, but that's a good thing, right? So, and more importantly, the message is getting out, and that's, to me, the reason I write is to communicate from my heart and soul the experience that I have had around the world, whether it's fighting side by side with two para and in Afghanistan, when I had a British para battalion attached to my unit, or a Canadian unit, or being a school superintendent of one of the largest systems in the country with 150,000 students, or being a secretary of transportation, being out there and seeing the, Joe lunch pail, Jane lunch pail, going to work, coming home, what they want out of life, to have a family, raise their family, and not have an orthodoxy shoved down their throat. I've been through throughout American fabric, the fabric of society, and I feel like I have a way of pulling all that together and weaving a story that touches on that, and metaphorically, Garrett Sinclair in Phalanx Code starts out in prison. And I spent a lot of time thinking about how to start this book, because the American people are psychologically, in many cases, imprisoned right now, because the mainstream media, because you can't break the narrative. You have a metaphorical narrative fence around you. You can't, and if you do escape from that, they have snipers, the mainstream media, shooting at you as you run into the wood line to try to survive, and hunker down, and then come back and help more people escape, and to carry that metaphor forward. But Sinclair starts out in actual disciplinary barracks at Fort Leavenworth in this story, and I won't give away too much, but he breaks out, and that's as I was thinking about Phalanx Code and the imprisonment, psychological and intellectual imprisonment of the American people by the media, by the progressive left, by the keepers of the narrative. That's what this book is about. The Phalanx Code is about breaking out of that metaphorical imprisonment by the progressive left.
Wow. Jen?
I'm sort of without words, because that is so succinct about what it is. One of the things that we haven't talked about in either of the books is that, Garrett Sinclair, his deceased wife, was college roommates and friends with the president that exists in the book, and Garrett Sinclair has a cell phone to be in direct contact with her. Say more about that, Tony.
Yeah, so as I was writing the book, the very first book, Chasing the Lion, which is somewhere up here, it's this book right here, and so this was the first book, Chasing the Lion, in the series, and it's his wife, Melissa Sinclair, is Garrett Sinclair's wife, whom he met in church in Fayetteville, North Carolina, when they were teenagers in high school, before Garrett Sinclair went to West Point. And they get married after he graduates, and they have 2 children. And Melissa goes to college at Meredith College, which is sort of it is an all-female school, and it was basically a teacher's school at the time, and has certainly branched out with some really good programming for its students. But they were roommates at Meredith College in the story, and there's a secret that Melissa holds with her. Of course, she has shared that secret with her husband, with whom she has no secrets, and it's that Kim Campbell, the president, when she was in college, was in a drinking game and overserved a friend who died of alcohol poisoning. So that's, but given Kim Campbell's family, money, and connections, it was deemed an accident, and Kim went on to be a state senator, the governor of North Carolina, and then become the president of the United States. And when Melissa dies, supposedly of cancer, there's this tension between the president and Garrett Sinclair, and they're very close. They vacation together out on Figure 8 Island and on the coast of North Carolina. And Garrett Sinclair is always very respectful toward the president, but at the same time, something clawing at the back of his mind was, did Kim Campbell do something to bury the secret? And I've enjoyed keeping that tension going throughout the books, because I'm not sure which way I want to take it right now. And it's still, it's still clear and present. It's that tension between them. He needs her, she needs him. She gives him a cell phone to use that only rings on her private burner cell phone, and they have some interesting conversations. And he leads a task force called Task Force Dagger that does special presidential missions with a very small group of people. And in Chasing the Lion, I received some feedback, a lot of super positive feedback, and love the new character, love the new series. But there are always those hamsters that come at you and say, well, a 3-star general wouldn't be out on the front line and doing this or that. And so in the next book, Total Empire, I sort of address that head on. I have him, report to the Pentagon because, all the Pentagon geniuses, want him to not go to the front line and all of that. And he's actually in a meeting in the Oval Office with the president, and the president is actually defending him as the Secretary of Defense is saying that he shouldn't be on the front lines. And she's, well, what was General Patton doing at the crossroads then? And what level did jumped into Afghanistan? That was 100 people. That was a captain's job. Didn't a colonel or a general jump into Afghanistan? What was that, just to get their gold star on their jump wing? Or is there a need for leadership at decisive points on the battlefield? And so I sufficiently chagrin the Secretary of Defense in that part of the story, but I also address the issue for my readers who really don't understand modern day or even battles dating centuries ago, that where, Braveheart, there you have Braveheart right there leading the charge. So there was this misunderstanding about leadership and where you are on the battlefield, and where you are is at the most decisive point. And helping his decision making is this phone that Jan references that Sinclair has, where he's able to communicate with the president to make sure he's doing what she wants, and also to just have somebody to talk to, because leadership is lonely at the top. That is a very true statement.
Wow. Some other great numbers came up as you.
I was anticipating that.
So I've done the numbers on the protagonist, Garrett Sinclair, with that. That's fair, yeah. So Garrett, Garrett, is that correct?
That's correct.
is 89. Sinclair is 85. So Garrett is 89, which is was actually virus in one instance, but it's also palladium, like the rare precious metal. You have the Royal Palladium here in London. You know, it's a big play. It's a movie playing out. But 85 is storm. It's awakening. It's silver. So you could look at it and say, well, it's a virus storm, and people will have many thoughts about that because of the last 3 or 4 years. But it could be silver plus palladium. It could be many things. But you add them together, it comes to 174. Garrett Sinclair comes to 174, which comes to the very first piece of gematria code that President Trump and Melania shared with us as they came down the escalators, which was currency exchange in Trump Tower. That's 174. That's the very first piece. When he actually got off the, announced his candidacy, I, interestingly enough, met Ivanka, his daughter, 5 days before that in Manhattan. And that's when I started to get my first inkling of the numbers. I didn't understand the alphanumeric relationship, but nevertheless, I was activated and then activated again in 2020. But Garrett Sinclair, 174, comes to trust the plan, eye of the storm, currency exchange, and it also comes to real Donald Trump, which is his Twitter and Truth Social handle. So Garrett Sinclair, real Donald Trump, reporting to the president, having a secret mobile phone and all that good stuff. So phone is 58 of Ivanka, actually. But is there any, well, I don't know, did you get any inspiration? You've worked with President Trump, you've been writing your books, and is there any parallel in terms of, he's obviously been a president and commander-in-chief, but maybe he's reporting to another president, perhaps?
Yeah,
Oh, good maneuver there, Tom.
one of the things that I try to capture that I think President Trump has done an excellent job of is this continuous strategic communication.
Yeah.
And trying, a lot of times people will make fun of or laugh at or whatever, but it's because they don't take it seriously. If you take a look at what he says each time, for the most part, some of them are jokey or, intentionally, funny or loose or whatever you might want to say. But on some, many of the tweets, the truths and statements are strategic for a reason, and so I incorporated that into some of my books. Double Crossfire has some of that. I co-authored some books with a guy named Nick Irvin, where particularly the second book that I wrote with him, where I have a president who is constantly, someone is constantly sending out messages via Twitter. I forget what I called it. It's like Maximus Anon or something like that. And at the very end, you learn who it is, and it could be the president. That's sort of the MacGuffin that carries through that story, is who's sending these tweets out that are kind of telling who's going to die next. It's a sniper story, and I don't know if I've got it up here. Reaper. It's one of these. It's Reaper Threat Zero. This book right here is the one, and essentially the way that story starts is we commit a drone strike that kills some family members over in the Middle East of some country, and the head of that family sends an assassin or hires an assassin to kill the family members of the president's cabinet as they're going to a family day at Camp David. And there's a convoy of family members on a bus and some Secret Service, and it's an ambush, and women, children are slaughtered right there. That's the opening scene, and so the Reaper is called in to assess the situation and to help out. The president then directs the Reaper and two other snipers, a Navy SEAL and a Force Recon guy, to go kill the family members of this guy who ordered the attack. And it happens in Iran and Azerbaijan and all of that. And so it becomes this very moral dilemma for him. But throughout all of that, there's this tweeting that goes on. And it, like most of these stories, a lot of it's an inside job, right? So, and it's the president that is leading the story as far as who's really done this, who's really behind this. It's not the people overseas; it's people close to home, and so from a sort of a story building standpoint, I've incorporated a lot of that presidential direct communication with the people, where he leapfrogs over the analysis that the mainstream media wants to color it with, and he's able to pounce right into everybody's phone.
Well, Camp David is 73, which is children. Actually, you talked about they're going after the family. 25 plus 48 is 73. When you talked about this, you mentioned what was the name, Mega Anon or whatever the person on Twitter.
His fake Twitter, his Twitter company in his book.
Yeah.
What was it?
Yeah.
Oh, there's Phalanx is the name of the company. There's the Optimus code, and then there's Lanx Pro, LANX Pro. Is it's a combo Google, Twitter. It's actually where Elon Musk is trying to go, and one of the in Phalanx code, very Mitch Drusen is very Muskian. He's not Musk though, but he's got a hyperloop that tunnels throughout the Rockies, and he's able to get from one part of his compound to the next in seconds, because he's constructed this multi-billion-dollar, suction, point A to point B hyperloop, and a lot of the action actually happens in and around the hyperloop. And it's the second time I've used a hyperloop. I'm fascinated by Elon Musk and his adherency to freedom of speech and so forth. And when I wrote this book, I was using, because I'd read he was going to use the term X, but he hadn't done it, and the editors got involved and said, well, it's Twitter now, and so they changed it from X to Twitter. This was a year ago, right? Because everything's 18 months a lag, and so then of course he changes to X. I would have looked even more brilliant, because I had already started calling it X then, but which is fine. But at the end of the day, there's the plot, essentially the tension in Phalanx code is between Mitch Drusen's, who's a tech billionaire with all the hyperloops. He's got a Project Optimus that is focused on reinforcing good deeds, helping bridge the narrative gap, and trying to bring out the good in people. And then you have Aurelius Blanc, a Frenchman who owns Phalanx Corporation, and that's a like a Zuckerberg-esque company that he has Lanx Pro, LANX Pro, which is sort of his all-in-one Google, Twitter, Instagram. It's all right there, and the AI sucks every time you touch your phone. It's pulling down information and updating your profile in real time, and it's sort of where we're headed right now. But and so it's Blanc versus Drusen, and when Sinclair gets out of prison, it's Drusen that has broken him out of prison, and it's Drusen that wants him on his team to help Project Optimus, and President Campbell's daughter Blair is working for Drusen on Project Optimus because it's utopian. It's trying to better society, and of course Sinclair knows Blair Campbell, the president's daughter, because his daughter and Blair are the same age, and they hung out together, at the beach and all that when he would vacation when she was governor and that kind of thing. And so, and part of the early part of the story is, Blair is being chased by phalanx operatives, and there's very, very much this contest between the phalanx operatives and the Project Optimus do-gooders. And there's the do-gooders are simply trying to better society, and of course the phalanx operatives are trying to gain power, and that's the general setup. And Sinclair is brought in to protect the do-gooders, and as he begins his journey, he learns some things that not everything is as it seems.
There's so much of that. When you said about Optimus, so it obviously made me think of Optimus Prime with Transformers, and the leader of the Autobots. Optimus is 113, which is trumpet, which is universe. It's a page in the Law of War manual. The 2020 election was 11-3. Prime is 61, miracle, Don Jr. But again, that comes to 174, so it comes to real Donald Trump, and it comes to Garrett Sinclair. So talking of this anonymous Twitter thing, I love how you've pulled all those pieces in and you had a prediction on X. So both, you probably are aware of him as well, I'm sure, Tony, but someone that Jan has a good, I watch from a distance, but Jan there's a guy out right now on Twitter called Ariel. Me and Jan have spoken about this, but it's a good point to bring it. It's a good time to bring it up. So people like, well, who's Ariel? He seems to drop lots of information in a quite, anon way. People don't know who he is, and he really doesn't hold his, he doesn't take prisoners. And I've been wondering who he is, and he's referenced Jan a few times, and they've had kind of a bit of mutual respect of passing things back and forth. And anyway, I'm just going to put it out there and let people, let the chips fall where they may. So people wondering who he is. And I mentioned to Jan the other day, and I said, well, most of what he says I like, and then occasionally he'll kind of have a bit of a sideswipe at President Trump. So on the surface, I'm not a fan of that because I'm, President Trump 1000%. But then I shared with Jan that I've done some numbers on this, and Ariel, if you do the numbers on Ariel, A is 1, B is 2, comes to 45. So who's the 45th president? President Trump. His Twitter handle is Proletario1, which comes to 140, which comes to The Apprentice, comes to the Trumps, it comes to the military, comes to Tom Numbers, comes to the Quantum, comes to a lot of things. But if you add those together, so Proletario1 plus Ariel, it comes to 185. It's Donald John Trump. So I just wonder, because he misspeaks as well, and he does spelling errors. Anyway, when I shared that with Jan, she laughed off her chair. It was a brilliant moment. But it's interesting you brought up the thing of these anons and the whole Twitter field, and right now where we are. So Jan, you might have some thoughts on that, because you have, like I said, you've passed indirectly or maybe directly some communication. He's definitely referenced you, and I know you've referenced him on Twitter, and you're both big hitters on Twitter, on X.
So we have spoken behind the scenes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I hadn't realized he referenced me twice on revealing or making a point or something. It was pointed out to me by some friends that saw it. While I was in the States, a lot of people were asking me, do I trust so-and-so? And I said, I don't worry about trusting them.
Yeah.
What I'm concerned about is what is the content and the context.
Yes.
Because if we make it about personalities, or people are spending too much time with character assassination, that is a diversion. It's purposely taking you away from what you should be focusing on. So I often say, it might not feel right, but it might not feel wrong, but just let it sit, because the way life will unfold is more and more information will come that will latch onto it, and it'll give you the answers. But you have to trust yourself, and of course, trust God. But if you don't trust yourself, then it's pretty hard for you to trust God, because then you'll be doubting whether God really is real. You'll be asking all those questions, but you trust yourself because you know what to believe, and just stay with that.
Yeah, definitely trust yourself, trust God. Wouldn't that be funny though? I mean, Tony just said about when people found out who the character was. If we find out that it's a Trump account, won't surprise me.
Okay. Well, I don't like to make any guesses or suppositions. I just had a little X battle with someone who misquoted me in a very negative way, and I don't mind criticism. Criticize me all you want, but the most stressful thing for me in doing this is making sure I have my facts. And when people ask me, well, hypothetically, I say, I'm not answering those questions, because somebody, if I give a hypothetical, will be posting on X, Dr. Jan HALPER-HAYES said, blah, blah, blah. And that's exactly what she did, but she took it out of a podcast. It was, the good thing is so many people come to my defense that I don't have to come to my own defense. But this was something that was really in particular of don't misquote me on really important subjects. And those are the things that actually right now I'm worried about on a much larger scale, because there are all these people coming out of the woodwork attacking other people online. And when any kind of movement gets close to success, ironically, infighting increases. And we've got to do something to be able to pull that back. And I'm not sure exactly what, but I'm working on it.
If we trust our hearts and stay together, and I think you're very well loved in the community. People will leap to your defense, Jan, because you're like Xena, the warrior princess.
Aww.
People love you, So,
everybody loves Dr. Jan, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Before we finish, one of the other things, Tony, if you're comfortable giving kind of a little pep talk, because you were in the Trump administration, you were in the military, you're still very close with a lot of people, and I'm not going to list their names, but a lot of names that are often, talked about. We know they're in certain positions still. And one of the things is too many people are sending me DMs. I've had enough. When is it going to happen? I quit. I'm done with this. And Tony, can you just give them a little bit of an understanding why we need to stick through this and we'll eventually get there?
Yeah, I'm happy to, Jan. I do stay plugged in with the universe of folks. And probably first and foremost, the support of everyone that you're talking about has been what has energized and helped the president through this really trying time, right? I mean, think about there's no kind of persecution in history that I can compare this to. That's at least in U.S. history, where you have this kind of fraudulent effort to go after a really good man, and not to mention a great president. Every time I've been in his presence, he's been nothing but a gentleman. And he is absolutely I said that on Don Jr.'s podcast, and he said, don't say that again, you might ruin his reputation. And this is a man that cares deeply and passionately about every person watching this podcast, and the entire universe of people that might consider watching it. And he anyone else would have said peace out a long time ago. There's a reason that he is where he is. There's a reason why he's taken the lashings that he's taken. There's a reason that he is still in this fight, and not only still in this fight, he's winning. He's leading from the front. He's going where he needs to go. One day he may be in one of these bogus court hearings, but the next day he's speaking to the people of X state, South Carolina, New Hampshire, Iowa, pick a state. He gets energy because from all of you out there in the listening universe, because he cares so deeply about this country. And the reason I mentioned about him being a gentleman is that from the outside looking in, if all you do is consume the MSNBC garbage and that kind of stuff, you think he's this, raving lunatic, and it's nothing could be further from the truth. And he's a good businessman. He's a hard businessman. He's had to make tough decisions all his life. He grew up in Queens. He had to muscle his way in the real estate industry and New York City. So yeah, there's all of that. But at the end of the day, he cares deeply about people, and he cares about all of you listening. And he is doing this for all of you. He doesn't need any more money. He doesn't need any more fame. He certainly doesn't need the lashings that he's taken from the media, from the Soros-funded justice system, from the Biden administration is complicit in all of this. And what we have is a real tipping point for our country. And really only one person can lead us out of this situation that we're in. And it's Donald Trump. And if we don't support him, if we don't continue to stick with him, then the movement loses steam. And you talk that jackboot grows from a size 10 to 2 jackboots that are size 15, and it will suffocate the American experiment, the democracy, the republic in which we thrive. And there's one person that can lead us, that can is a David and Goliath kind of story. And I'll tell you, Goliath is the mainstream media, the Biden administration, all these rogue, politicized, weaponized prosecutors, and Trump with his slingshot. And we are his slingshot.
Wow. Oh, that's great. That's great. And if I can just add something about Trump, he didn't want people talking about this in 2016, but I lived in New York when Ivana and Trump became the Golden Society couple. And he was loved by the media for 35 years. He could do no wrong. Once, when a 3-year-old girl who needed treatment at Sloan Kettering in New York, the airlines would not let her on a plane from LA. He sent his plane for her. And the media wrote about this. I mean, it's not that I've got some insight. I was living there at the time while he was doing all of these great things for the city and people. And then he had a flat tire and he was in a suit. And this man came by and said, "You're too dressed up. Let me change that tire for you." You know what he did? He paid the man's mortgage off. Those are the kinds of things he has always done. The media loved him. He was a darling until he came down the golden escalator. And then they turned on him. And you know, how would you like to have been loved for 35 years and everyone just sang your praises, and suddenly the knives are out and he has withstood all of that?
Amen. He has. Yeah, President Trump is amazing. He's been pivotal in my understanding of all of this, and won't go into it now, but he's mentioned my work many, many times. And when he speaks to you in comms, for some very obvious, it's like, oh wow, you know. So if you're listening, sir, thank you very much for everything you continue to do. Just in closing, I had a question for both of you, and it's so America, there's the commander-in-chief. Because of the executive orders, etc., we're under a wartime presidency. Does that, through those orders, does that automatically spill over into the rest of the world, or were there other things done in the UK and other places to put us into the same jurisdiction, if I'm using the right terms correctly, or the same wartime laws? And I'm also wondering, because everything's done on the Law of War manual. Who wrote the Law of War manual? How did that come into being?
We need another hour for that.
Part two.
They you know, at a very high level, you know, the authorization of use of military force is what it's called, AUMF. That's granted by the U.S. Congress. Has been in existence really since 9/11. And then it was expanded for operations in Iraq as well. And then it was expanded to be able to strike quote unquote terrorist targets elsewhere, whether that be the Arabian Peninsula or the Philippines and so forth. And it's a real bone of contention within you know, the executive branch and the legislative branch of our government. And of course, when it's a Republican president using military force under that AUMF, the mainstream media says he's going to start World War III and nuke the world, and he's not authorized. And of course, now when Biden does it, it's all legit and you don't hear anything about it. So which is a real good example of how upside down the world is today. And so, you know, I guess what I would say about the use of military force in the quote unquote wartime that we seem to be in a persistent state of right now, it benefits a lot of people, not the dead and wounded young men and women that are over there as catching javelins in Syria and Iraq and elsewhere from the Shia militia groups. It angers me that we have such bad foreign policy right now with the utterly incompetent Antony Blinken and a president that really doesn't know really much, from my perception, what's going on, and then a Secretary of Defense that didn't bother to let his boss know that he was in the hospital and would be out for a few weeks, while we have war raging in the Middle East, and it's a real sad state of affairs right now. And the only people really winning are the defense contractors who are raking in the bucks, and so that's part of the issue that we confront right now. The law of land warfare was written a long time ago. The Geneva Conventions, all of that, is applicable today to the extent that anybody cares to use it. If you're a conservative, you'll be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. If you're a liberal, you'll certainly be given every possible exit off ramp before prosecution within any of that domain. So that's really all I would say there. I'm pretty sure I'm not answering your question, but perhaps that's deliberately so.
Okay. Yeah, I think it is. I guess just one detail with that though. So are we, because of the events and actions that President Trump has taken in terms of executive orders, and maybe even some that existed before he was officially president, does that automatically suck every other nation globally into that, or do similar orders have to be signed and done in countries to make them under the same kind of silent war that we're in?
Similar countries, the UK, Australia, everybody has to have their own policies and executive orders. When I was a deputy commander in Afghanistan, I mentioned I had Brit and Australian forces working for me. They all had solid line back to London, for example, for the Brits, and dash line to me. So before I could tell them to attack the hill, they had to, metaphorically, they had to go to London, Whitehall, and get permission to attack the hill. So every country has its own drill. The EU, I think, is a little less clear on that. NATO, EU, there's a lot of groupthink happening right now, which is never a good thing. So I would just say that I understand what you're asking, and what I would tell you is that globally we need to make sure that we truly understand what's happening, and the only way to do that is to ignore the narrative of the mainstream media and find the right people to talk to, like yourself and Jan and others, on particularly on X, which is the only place that's allowing freedom of speech nowadays. Because you won't see it on Instagram, you won't see it on Facebook. Already, Zuckerberg's pouring billions into making sure Biden wins re-election. I mean, it is truly a rigged world today, and only someone with the fortitude of President Trump can effectively combat that. And think about how fixated the world is on Trump right now. What they were saying at Davos just a few weeks ago, what NATO is saying. They're afraid that they might have to start paying their fair share again. So you might ask yourself, well, who's really in charge here? Because if Trump is the topic of the news every day, and people are scrambling to make sure, it's kind of like washing your car before you sell it, right? And so there's a lot of you could draw a lot of conclusions from that, but Trump is in the news. He's dictating what's going on in many respects. And if it weren't for Trump's NATO policy, for example, to pay their 2%, think about where they might be with regard to Ukraine. Thank God they did, right? And so it wasn't Trump that, it was Biden that broke NATO. And this never gets talked about. By leaving Afghanistan the way he did, he left every NATO nation, 30 NATO nations, hanging. No coordination, no way out, no nothing. Just, we're leaving, sorry, peace out. And and NATO was that, their ass was chapped, man. I mean, each of the Brits, everybody was upset at America for just cutting and running the way we did. And you won't hear that, but if Trump were president, that would be every day. Trump broke NATO, Trump left early, Trump didn't coordinate. And that's what I'm talking about. The headlines would be very, very different every single day if what's actually happening, if Trump were president. It'd all be Trump's fault. He'd be impeached for a 35th time. But because they got who they want in power, and they got all these crazy leftist progressive policies going on, it's all okay. So that's all I'll say about that.
You actually got a lot of good stuff out of him, Tom. You were very good at trying to get those questions in there without very good British understatement way of asking questions. But when you put a little blurb at YouTube, also add, if they want confirmation that there is a plan and they want to hear from a general with experience, they need to listen to this whole podcast.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Tony.
You're welcome.
Been a pleasure. Been really good. It's been a lot of fun. And I hope to do it again. Part 2, there'll be more to, and we can talk more as well about the books, because I know now more about them. So fantastic.
Fantastic. All right.
Yeah.
Garrett Sinclair, 174, real Donald Trump. Maybe.
There you go.
There you go. There you go. Thanks, Tony. Speak to you again. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you.
God bless you. Thank you.
God bless.
Oh, before you go, where can both of you, where can people find you? Where can people find you?
So I'm on Twitter at AJ Tata, and I'm on Facebook, AJ Tata author, and I'm on Instagram, AJ Tata _author. And then I have ajtata.com is my website, and you can buy any or all of my books there. And what I would say is that Phalanx Code, all your listeners out there, and I know Jan and I have talked about this, but if we consume liberal art, such as movies and books and all of that, and supporting conservative writers. I have one of the big 4 publishers in Macmillan, St. Martin's Press, and they support me. They've taken, quite frankly, a risk to support a conservative in a world that is really run by, not conservatives, I'll say. But my publisher and my editor, they've all, I have great relationships with them. And so reinforcing that support and showing that their support of me is not in vain by, supporting, spending $25 to support a conservative author that's, I've taken a lot of slings and arrows working for Trump and had to rebuild my business, had to rebuild my life. And in the dedication and Phalanx Code, I really thank a lot of people for all of that, and certainly the extent that your listeners can afford that, it'd be great to sell 5,000-10,000 copies. I don't make any money off it. I've already been paid to write the book, but it'd be nice to send a message, or a loud shot across the bow of the progressive institutions out there that tend to support lefties. So that's my message. And thank you for anybody who buys the book.
Thanks, Tony. And Jan,
help me do the same thing I did with Double Crossfire. Break the supply chain, force it into reprinting.
That's it.
Okay. You know what? Go to drjan.substack.com, because I just wrote a great article about the book. So that would be great if you want to have an understanding. On X, I'm Biz Shrink, but B-I-Z or Z for those of us over here in England, _ shrink. And on Truth, at Real Dr. Jan.
There you go. We'll put the links below for both of you. And talking to Substack, I've just set mine up, and I've written my first chapter to people asking my kind of story with the numbers. So I am writing my book. It's like an origin story to here to this point now, and I've entitled it "In the Beginning Was the Word, and Then Came the Numbers." So I like that title. You know.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
All about that first sentence. So
Exactly.
Okay. Well,
all right, Tom. Thanks so much.
great.
Thanks,
Really
Tony.
appreciate
God
it.
bless.
All right.
Thanks,
All
Jen.
right.
Bye bye.
God bless. Take care.
Bye. God bless.
Bye.
Bye.